Well, again, everybody, this is Steve coming to you with a new writing video. This time I'm talking about transportation. Uh, Transportation is an important element in any story. It doesn't matter if it's fantasy, sci-fi, etc. You've got to have some way to get from point A to point B. It doesn't matter if it's the house next door, to another room in the house, to another city, country, nation, planet, star system, dimension, etc. You have to have a means to get where you're going. When it comes to transportation should be very genre specific, very story specific. Like, for example, if you're writing sci-fi, or like this here is one of my example images I created using AI art, Midjourney as a matter of fact, which if you're a writer, I recommend AI art from the standpoint of ideas, and ideas only. I'll cover that more in another video, but don't use it for professional work. There's a whole legal cesspit that's building around that's going to sink a lot of people if you're not careful. But as far as creating ideas, it's a gold mine. You can create all kinds of example art and things like that using AI or the AI art systems. I used Midjourney. It's pretty good. There's other ones out there that are worth checking out. I forget the name of them, but if you do a quick Google search, there's like 10, 15 different ones. DALL-E was one of them. Bing's another one. They're good for roughing out ideas and helping you with the creative process by giving you visual guides for your writing. But anyways, that aside, like I say, transportation should be story and genre specific. I mentioned my story Cat Quest, which is kind of a RPG parody. It's basically D&D done with cats. It's meant to be tongue in cheek about everything. Like the horses in that world are like these gigantic Maine Coon cats that are horse sized, kind of like you see in this picture here. I don't know if he's directly Maine Coon, but that's basically that kind of cat. You've got smaller cats, you've got other cats and stuff in there. So given that the story is about cats who are adventurers and do questing, the fact that you have cat-drawn carriages is completely appropriate. They're a normal nomad's or merchant's carriage, like you see here. This one's basically it's supposed to be a merchant's carriage, but it's the AI ended up making it more like a what is it? A gypsy cabin or gypsy cart. So, but yeah, you're gonna when you get getting back to the transportation thing now that I've gotten off on that little rabbit trail. When it comes to transportation, like I say, it's going to be story and genre specific. And like for example, you're not going to have somebody driving a Ford F-150 down a road in the middle of a medieval story, for example. I mean, that's like an extreme example, but you get the idea there. Exceptions. There are exceptions. Like time travel's a good one. Dimensional travel's a good one, where you step from one dimension to the other, where you have things that are completely out of place in that world. And not everything is going to necessarily be a transportation thing. But having things that are completely out of place in another world does make for an interesting way to write a story. It is a trope, so you have to be careful with that because it is a heavily used trope. But if you do it right, you can take that trope, remake it, and turn it into something new, interesting, different, etc. like that, a different way of looking at it. When it comes to transportation, kind of like I mentioned in the previous video about time, with transportation, what is the ground speed? How long is it going to take to get there? What resources is it going to require to get them there? Like if it's a horse-drawn carriage, What are your resources? Well, your resources are probably just, you know, 2 horses and a carriage and you and a food supply to get you to your destination. You know, sufficient enough to get you there. Food and water. As far as feeding the horse, which would be kind of fueling your engine, so to speak, that's just, you know, every so often you unhitch the horse and you send them off to graze in the grass and go get a drink out of the river and stuff like that. In some cases, you might tie a bag of oats to their face and let them chew on the oats as they're walking. You know, and another thing too is what propels your transportation? Is it a horse? Is it a bird? Are you flying on a gigantic bird? Because you remember in one of the previous videos I had it was like a little elf or sprite or something like that riding on the back of an owl. Well, in that case, that was his transportation. That transportation is fueled by eating mice. A lot of people don't think about that. Like, oh yeah, well, I got to go fuel my air steed and stuff. You know, because you see them as an animal. It's the fact that, yeah, they got to periodically go over and eat and stuff. Well, you're fueling your engine, the engine of your transportation device. Either the device itself, like the bird, for example, is the actual transportation, or the horse or whatever, or it's the engine that moves your transportation, such as a horse drawing a carriage. Your transportation is the carriage. The horse is the engine that draws the carriage. In a car, your transportation is the car itself. What drives it or moves it about is the engine, transmission stuff. That's what moves it. Starships, you have impulse drives, you have or sublight drives, or whatever you want to call them. You have FTL drive. You might use wormholes to jump from point to point. You might use hyperspace, subspace. Conduit, or like in Star Trek, they have the transwarp conduits. There's a lot of different ways you can move stuff around, and it's a matter of what is being moved. Is it you? Is it the thing you and the thing you're sitting in? Or like if you're transporting cargo, is it also the cargo you're transporting? Something you have to consider too is weights of the things you're transporting, because weight is a big factor on what moves where, because weight determines how much energy is necessary, or how much energy needs to be expended to move that object. If you look at Einstein's, or was it Einstein? I think it was Einstein, who said any object in motion tends to stay in motion, and any object at rest tends to stay at rest, and it takes energy to change that state. That energy can also be taken away through friction. It can be added through friction. Like when I say added through friction, take a look at like a belt, the pulley system. You have 2 pulleys. You have power on one, and the other is the one that receives the power. One produces it, one receives it, and the belt is the transmission means, and that belt attaches itself and clings to those pulleys and allows for motion through friction. So you've got that. You can have your engine for a particular item can be wind, because you have like ships, for example. With ships, the wind hits the sails and drives the ship. Steam train, you have a fire in a boiler, you have a fire in a boiler which boils water, which turns it to steam, and the steam expands and drives pistons, which then drive the wheels of the train. So that's kind of a indirect multi-step means of powering a particular vehicle or driver or engine or whatever it happens to be. Jet engines push air by taking it in, compressing it, superheating it, and pushing it out the back using jet fuel. Ships can also have large heavy oil engines. They can have steam engines. They can have gas turbine engines. A lot of Navy ships use gas turbine engines. How those work is a little beyond me, but basically you have a gas-powered turbine that runs at, I think, a low RPM, but it's low as far as like jet engines go, or turbines go, because turbines operate at speeds of like 11, 12,000 RPMs. So a slow speed or a slow RPM turbine would be like 4 or 5,000 RPM. So again, speed is relative, depending on the item. But like if you have a cargo ship, you're typically going to have something that's like like in antiquity, it was sail power. In modernity, you had steam power. Nowadays, you've got diesel engines, electric engines. You've got heavy oil engines, so on and so forth. Let me think here. Okay, walking. Walking is a form of transportation. The actual engine for moving you, in this case, or your character or whatever, is the muscles in the legs. Might be the arms, like if you're swinging from trees. The motivator is your arms swinging back and forth as you're going Tarzan style through the vines. It could be paddle power if you're on a river or a lake. And you're in a boat. So, you got, like I said, you got to look at what motivates it, how much energy does it require, how do you quote unquote fuel it or feed it, weight to energy expenditure, and some of the stuff you may not have to go that in depth. Other times you may have to go that in depth or deeper. I'm laying the framework. I'm letting you think this out as to what is going to be something that you will have to deal with in your story. How deep are you going to have to go? Are you going to go like really deep in the background and kind of light on the front end? Or are you going to go heavy on the front end and light in the back? Kind of both, kind of neither. How do you want to put this together, basically? Transportation also, when it comes, now this applies primarily to sci-fi, although it does happen in Magic, is transportation. There is something called traveling in the spirit, where you, it's kind of a long explanation, but the basic premise of it is you are picked up in one location and transported using spiritual means to another location. Kind of like the transporter systems in sci-fi, but it doesn't require any technology. It's all done on the spiritual level. Like I say, long explanation for that one. I'll let you research that one, but it's kind of a neat thing. Magic does kind of the equivalent of what sci-fi does, in the fact that it does its own kind of version of particle transporting. I have in my Earthfleet series, I have particle transporters, I have portal transporters. They have jump drive. They have wormhole drive. They have flash transporters. They have a flash transporter is kind of a fancy particle transporter without being a particle transporter. Now here's another interesting one. This one kind of falls on the mythical side. Is what's called a scar jump. A scar jump is a type of transporting where you basically fold space using non-technological means. It's done kind of on the spiritual level. It's kind of like being previous spirit transportation thing I was talking about. Traveling in the spirit. That's what I was thinking of. It's kind of the same idea, but you're taking the spirit side of things and applying science to it and folding space and moving between those two locations through that folded space. Scar jumping is actually a really neat way of doing kind of spirit transporting. There is I'm trying to think of other different forms of transportation. But anyways, there is a lot of different ways you can transport people, and you could be creative. You can come up with your own system if you want to, or you use existing systems. You can take those systems and you can rethink them. You don't have to follow the status quo on that. And be creative. Now, if it's something that needs to be cliche, go ahead and be cliche. With transportation, you're okay to be cliche. Just don't get too carried away with it. Uh, just like when I say you don't have to be cliche, take a look at this picture here with a cat pulling a cart rather than a horse. It's the cliche horse and carriage thing, but the horse isn't a horse; it's a cat. And oh, that was another one. Another big thing with transportation is navigation. Going from point A to point B is fine, but if you don't know where you're going or how you're getting there, that's a problem. People traveling on the sea and in the air, they use compasses, they use maps, they use GPS navigation. If you're traveling in the star, you use in the stars, you use star navigation. If you're let's take Ant-Man for example. If you're traveling in quantum space, you still not have to know how to navigate. How do you get from point A to point B? How do you move through time? How do you get into certain sublevels of quantum space and stuff like that? So there's, it's not just what are you transporting, how you're transporting it, energy usage and stuff like that. It's also navigation and knowing how to get there. Do you have adequate roads? Do you have good airspace? Is the airspace crowded? Is it empty? Is there like only a few airships up there? Is there a bunch? Weather affects transportation, especially like sailing ships and airships and stuff like that. Balloons, blimps, things like that. Hot air balloons, hydrogen balloons, helium balloons. Wind is going to have a big effect on that. Going back to terrain's going to have a big effect on that. Because if let's just say you can cover, cross between two cities in 2 days on flat ground, but then your next city is up in the mountains. It might take you 3 days to go the same distance. It might take you 10 days to go the same distance as you went before, because you're having to expend more energy because you're having to climb up or climb down and so forth. And like climbing up, a lot of people understand that part of it. That's the easy one to figure out, because you're going to have all this energy expenditure and you're going to be slowed down by this much, and you're going to have to fight your way up through this through this area, and it's got bad roads and stuff like that. Something I've noticed a lot of people don't think about or talk about much. Once you go up, you still have to go down, and if the angle is steep enough and you're in something like a semi-truck or you're in a carriage with a horse, you could, if you're not careful coming down that hill, you're going to get to a point where, that animal is going to stop being the engine, is going to start being the passenger, because you've got gravity helping you move down the hill. And, suddenly the horse is sitting next to you on the bench and you're going down the hill completely out of control. And you're going to have that with pretty much any form of transportation. You're gonna have to come up against elements like, say, for a sci-fi, you might be traveling along and you hit a black hole. Well, great, that black hole is gonna probably suck you in. Now you've got a problem. If you're out in the sea, it could be a whirlpool. Excuse me. If you're in the air, say like going back to that sprite or elf or whoever he was riding that owl. Well, what's to say there isn't somebody bigger in the air who might try to have you for lunch? I mean, look at the movie Avatar, not the second one, but the original one. What was the, I think his name was Scully or something like that, the one Marine guy who was crippled. Anyways, he in order to help out with the fight, he went out and he found the biggest dude that was on the planet, the biggest flying animal. And everybody under this dude feared him, but he was so big he didn't fear anybody else. So there's that dynamic to it. Transportation can be social, because you have like buses where you have large groups of strangers or large groups of familiar people. Like if you're going on a field trip, a business trip, it's a school bus. You've got schoolmates in there, classmates in there. You have maybe like a car or a station wagon, a van, motorhome, something like that, and you and your family are going out camping. Well, your transportation in that case is both a home, kind of like a gypsy wagon. It's both a home and a means of transportation, and maybe a means of transporting things. Trying to think if there's anything else that would be something to think about. Well, this would kind of go along with the idea of navigation is you need to have lighting internally and externally. Internally so you can do things inside the vehicle. Externally so you can see where you're going at night or in gloomy conditions and stuff. If you're out somewhere rustic, you're going to have to possibly ford, unless there's bridges in place, you're going to have to ford rivers and find transportation across things. Like in Off-Road Chronicles, Troubled Waters, at the end of the previous book, Dark Wanderings, Simon and his team come up against the Great Sea, and the trail literally goes down into the sea, which is hilarious. It's like, okay, so we need to cross the sea to get to the other side. How are we going to do this? It's like what Trevor said when I got up there. He looked out across the water and realized there was no way across, and he looked over at Simon and says, now what? So, and they had to wander around and find a way across the ocean, which happened to be them needing to go to a nearby pirate town, hire Rimuru, and have him transport them across the ocean. Something I did with that one to add a little suspense to it, instead of, oh yeah, he just jumps on a pirate ship, goes to the other side. One of the things that I did with that was that in Rimiru's case, his part of his enslavement, or making sure he stayed enslaved to what was it? Was it Despawn? It was the Pirate King, whoever he was. I can look it up. I'm bad with names, but even character names of my own characters. But anyways, he was being held by the Pirate King, and to make sure that he didn't flee, the Pirate King made sure that they only ever had enough food to do their mission and come back. If they if they were in port, all they got was 1 day of food and 1 day of water each day, maximum 2 days. So what he did was, when he took Simon aboard, they had 2 days worth of food and water. They snuck out of port, and he knew this was going to happen. So in his adventures, he had kind of shorted his crew on a number of occasions, and his crew was okay with that because they knew what he was doing. He shorted his crew and the supplies that they had, and they would sail over to these islands, and they would drop off these supplies at these various islands, so that when he escaped with Simon, which that's all he really needed, was he needed a paying customer so that he could get restarted on the other side, because Despond had taken all of his money. So he had literally no way to survive and no way to get to freedom the way he was, and he could only go where Despond wanted him to go. And I think, the more I think about it, it was Despond was his name. Anyways, and like I say, so what he had to do, Rimuru had to do, was he had to go to each of these islands and pick up more supplies, and the supplies were just enough to get him to the next island, and the next island, and the next island, and stuff. So that's, that's an idea. I mean, you're welcome to use that idea, because that's not, I wouldn't say that's necessarily native to my story, because I'm pretty sure others have done the same idea. But that was how I solved that problem of him traveling across the ocean. Making it exciting was the idea of scarcity, which I'm not sure if I've covered that in other stories, but that's a suspense point, is scarcity. Oh dear, are we going to have enough to get where we're going so we don't starve to death or die of thirst and stuff like that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Well, okay, there's one. Money and resources to facilitate the transportation, because if you're going from Washington to Washington D.C. to Seattle, Washington, do you have enough money to buy a plane ticket? Do you have enough money to buy food, to pay for lodging? That's still an element of transportation, because it determines, can you make that journey or can you not make that journey? Because if you don't have enough resources to make the journey is not possible, and you have to stay where you're at until you're able to make the journey. if you want to look at it from a medieval or fantasy standpoint, do you have the carriage? Do you have the horse? Is the horse healthy enough? Do you have enough food if there's not going to be food that can be gathered along the way? Because if you're going through like some dark, murky forest and there's no food for the horse, you gotta pack food into the wagon for the horse. Even if it's just a few bales of hay and a barrel of water, you got to stack that in there for the horse so that the horse can eat and drink. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to bring up. Well, bandits would be one thing. Are you going to run into bandits? Is that going to interfere with your transporting something? It's like what things will help it, what things will hinder it. Those are things to think about, and that goes for fantasy, sci-fi, historical, alt history, stuff like that. So, anywho, I think I've covered everything. If I think of something else, I'll add it to another future video as kind of like a footnote or something. But I think that's pretty much it. And this is just here to make you think and make you understand all the different aspects you have to take into consideration when creating a story. And like I say, these don't need to be things that are in the forefront of your story. They definitely need to be in the background, because you need to know how all the transportation is going to work for your particular story, as much as you can. Some of it you're going to find out as you do your writing. Especially if you do some exploratory writing. But then the rest of it you need to know in advance, so you can make the best story possible. Anyhow, I'll leave it at that, and I will catch you guys in the next video. And I appreciate you guys for continuing to listen. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, feedback, etc. like that, please let me know. Thanks.